we're going to start the evening by giving out our Art and Inspiration Award, which goes to a film that is very special in terms of capturing the essence of what art is, what an artist's life is. And this year, Queen of Hearts, Audrey Flack, won hands down. I mean, there was just no... So we're also very fortunate to have with us the director of the T. and Charles Addams Foundation, who are sponsoring this Art and Inspiration Award, and they will, Kevin Miserocchi, will make the award. So, Kevin, I'm going to turn it over to you. And Deborah and Rachel, can you please come down, our filmmakers?
Well, I didn't rehearse this, but we didn't talk too much about this, but this is a lovely award. And to have the opening night be for the two of you with Audrey, how wonderful. Congratulations to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It is very attractive, I must say, compared to many, I mean, it's very nice. I didn't prepare anything either, but we want to welcome you all here tonight. We're really thrilled and proud to be having our premiere in this area on opening night of the Hamptons Documentary Festival. And all I was going to say by way of introduction to the film is that when I first met Audrey, one of the other producers introduced me to her and said, oh, I've met this wonderful person and we have to do a film about her. And we had coffee in a coffee shop on the Upper West Side, and I really the only way to put it is I kind of fell in love with Audrey right then and there. And I said, yes, let's do this film. And I confess, I didn't know very much about her art at that time. I didn't even know a great deal about art history. I knew a little bit. So for me, the film has been a real process of discovery, of getting to know Audrey, of getting to know her art, of getting to know more about the period she worked in. And you know, we're very happy to take you on that journey with us. And my partner and the editor of the film and co-director, Rachel Reichman, fortunately knew a lot more about Audrey and about art history. And so I would say we became a very complementary team on putting this together.
So I won't tell you long stories about Audrey, but I was a huge fan since I was very young, and actually forgot about her after I was about 17 and went on with my life. And I know there are some people here in the audience who are also fans of Audrey in high school. And when Deborah asked me invited me to participate in the project, every reservation I had went away when I was fondly reconnected to this extraordinary artist. And to get to meet her as a person, explore her life, has been kind of an indescribably profound experience, which we want to share with you guys. The other thing we want to say is we're very grateful for the festival for inviting us. We're among some fantastic work, some we've seen, and some great work I know we're going to discover here. So we do want to thank the Hamptons Doc Festival very much. And also we want to thank the T. and Charles Addams Award for recognizing us in the film, for Foundation for giving us the award. Thank you.
Thank you.
Charles Addams.
That was really awesome. Thank you very, very much.
Well, thank these two, because I didn't have any, they wouldn't let me have any input.
Okay, so this was going to, I'm sure.
Walter, they didn't let me put the band in.
So Audrey, this was going to be one of my first questions as I was watching the film. You know, you're an artist. You're used to being in the studio by yourself, having full, total control of everything you do, to the extent that you can. Yeah. Once it leaves the studio, of course, you have no control whatsoever, which probably relates somewhat to how you felt about this movie. But, you know, the very first thing you said when you sat down was they didn't let me have any control. So I'd love to hear from all of you. How do you manage working in a situation where you're subject to someone who is used to holding on to the narrative and controlling every aspect of it, and then creating a situation where you're able to talk about her to a larger public and yet still maintain your own vision. I guess that's kind of a broad topic, but we'll start at the end and just work our way down.
Well, there were a lot of challenges along the way. I'm trying to think, I've made sort of biographical films before, but often they're of people who were sort of political figures. They were a little more distant, or they lived in another country. So this was a first for me to really be working this closely with somebody who I had so much access to, and they had so much access to me. And we did, Audrey definitely wanted to see, she wanted to see a cut partway through, and she, are you putting this in the film, and are you putting that in the film? And I come from a kind of old school documentary background where I felt that would really compromise the film. As you said, my vision. I mean, it really had to be our film about Audrey, or it would have been something different. I mean, we could have done a different film, probably, but I just felt it was very important that the film be independent. And I promised her I'd show it before it was done, and we showed it to her a week before we finished.
Yeah, 1 week.
And Audrey's so clever that, I wouldn't show it to her, so she finally started saying, well, what's wrong with it if you won't show it to me?
Then I said, I'm not going to come, I'm not going to see it if I don't like it. So.
But there is a challenge about a balance also between, we were talking earlier today about another film that somebody has made about a living person, and I don't know that I'd really thought about it before, but you are confronted with different, Audrey's going to see the film, her friends are going to see the film, her family's going to see the film. So you always, there are just a lot of things impinging all the time.
When I did see it, I thought it was terrific. I think they did a great job. I really do. I think the magic between them was kind of... I want to tell you something before I forget, okay? Severin, my great assistant, we got so excited, we made T-shirts. Queen of Heart T-shirts, so they're outside if you want a T-shirt. But I did crack up when I saw it. The stuff about Melissa was really hard to see. And that was theirs, that was theirs. So
you gave it to us, Audrey.
I allowed it.
You allowed it. You opened up about it.
It's something we should talk about later, being a female, a mother, and a parent, particularly of a special needs child. So anyhow, go ahead. This is the other great director.
Well, I don't have a great deal to add to this because I also do come from a perspective that the subject should not be a part of the filmmaking process unless that's something that's decided and that is essential to the work itself. It becomes a very different project. And for me also was I came on board after most of the film was shot. And so in a way that was great because I didn't know Audrey as a person, I knew her as an artist, I respected her work, but and for me, my background as a filmmaker and an editor is, I come to the material and it's better for me to know very little about what was going on location, all the behind the scenes stuff, because I need to have some kind of perspective at the beginning of what is on the screen. And you lose that when you know what went on behind the scenes. And I lose my perspective very, very quickly, but I need to just start with that. And also it's beneficial that I didn't know Audrey as a person. I didn't have an investment in portraying her as a particular kind of person, though one of our producers, Amy Sultan, did know Audrey, and she weighed in regularly about certain things that she felt might have been out of balance, and that was really helpful for us. On the other hand, we had, the goal was to make a really good film. And you know, it's hard to do that. There's so many things tugging at you. You want to be nice. You want to do a film that's going to make a lot of money and whatever, you know. And the bottom line is no, 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 no. Where's the integrity in the work, you know? And so that was our guiding principle.
And you know, I should just acknowledge there are many people in the room who contribute. There's several people in the room who we interviewed who are on the cutting room floor, including Terrie. And Jules. Well, no,
I got my chance right here.
But we really, you know, it all contributes. It's all part of the process of, I mean, as I said in the beginning, I wasn't being kind of disingenuous. I had to learn a lot about photorealism, about Audrey, about art history, about abstract expressionism. I mean, the whole thing was, I think every film, actually, it's one of the privileges of making documentaries, is you get to learn a whole new world and subject matter. And so it was, I mean, I just want to acknowledge how much I appreciate all the contributions of you and Jules and Joan, and is there anybody else here who stayed on the cutting room floor? Often we have interviewees who are in the room also, and you know, as they say, it takes a village. It takes even more than the village. It takes practically a whole country to make a film.
I want to say something while I remember it. One of the things I think that these two people did that I have never seen in a film about a specific person or a specific artist is they contextualized. They put all the photorealists in, you know? They put all of that movement that should be taken a look at, you know, that sort of got submerged. It was after AbX and before photorealism. There were a lot of realists around, like Perlstein, and you know, you got that in the film, but they included and they contextualized. And I think it's one of the things that makes this film go way beyond me. I think it's important.
Well, it actually was really kind of surprising how much information you managed to pack into this film. Very deftly, as Audrey mentions, you provided a certain depth of context and broad context in a kind of a minimal way, just by deftly selecting certain pictures to show, and it's a complicated and interesting narrative because you're trying to establish an entire narrative in the space of 74 minutes that spans a very broad time span and also a really complicated era in American art. And especially a narrative about the changing nature of our attitude about women in this situation. You know what I mean? You know, when Audrey sat down and said the very first thing was that you wouldn't let her control the narrative, and you know, and I mentioned being in the studio. Of course, you have all the control in the world of what you're doing there, but as a woman artist in this particular era where you came up, you had virtually no control. Everything about the commerce, the contextualization, the showing of the work, the narrative that was being made about the work was all under control of somebody else. So I can see why you wanted to maintain such strong control, because losing control has been the story for such a long time. And knowing this, how did you manage so beautifully to maintain your friendship with Audrey, get the story out there, and yet keep that distance in a way?
You know, I don't know how much Audrey even feels aware of it or what. I kept a certain distance emotionally while we were, you know, I felt it was important to have some, for instance, I mean, we're staying with Audrey tonight. I never stayed there while we were making the film. I didn't, you know, I didn't want to get too close, because then, it just goes back to what I said in the beginning. I felt it would compromise the process. So as much as, you know, I was getting to know her and we were getting involved with each other, I mean, it's building a relation. It's like, you know, I mean, I've always said this about your editor, but I guess it's true about your subject too. It's like getting married. You know, it's a real commitment. It's a real relationship. And this film took 4 years to make. I don't know if we said that. Yeah, I didn't think it was going to be that long when I started. I thought, blithely, a year to fundraise and develop, and maybe a year to film. And I thought we would do it in probably 2 years, and it was, and partly the funding was very, very difficult, frankly. I started this film in the early 2016, so I actually thought that we were going to be having a woman president shortly, if you remember back, and I was going to make this nice film about a woman painter, and I thought we were going to be in a very different world. And I think it did, I really do think it made the funding harder, because a lot of I depend on foundations a lot for support and sort of philanthropic support, and I think people's priorities shifted. There were such drastic kind of, social issue, immigration, human rights. There were so many really drastic issues that people needed to put their funding dollars towards, that I think it did make our job more challenging on the fundraising front. But also it took a long time to find those photos. I mean, Rachel especially. Rachel's is an indefatigable researcher and wouldn't let go. And no, we've got to find that, and we've got to find that, and we've got to find that. And
well, she found photos of Missy as an infant, and you remember her eyes?
They were in your house, Audrey.
I know, but they were in my studio in a drawer in boxes, and Rachel sat there. I didn't know what she was doing. She was.
Thank God.
Thank God, because I look at that now, and in that world, you look at that child's eyes, and that was not like any normal child's eyes. And you got it, and it's almost, I think the film is important too as a medical statement, in the world of autism, of seeing something that early, some look that later Melissa looked right through you. It was this stare that, people would say, what is she looking at? And then people thought she was blind. And she has the vision of almost a bird. The peripheral vision is incredible. So you did it. It was probably too painful for me to even look at those images. I had not seen them in so many years.
Well, the goal was to get you distracted so that I could go in and paw around. Here I was in a total stranger, an artist I admired who's this great painter, and I didn't feel comfortable, obviously, invading her space. But I knew if I could distract you, I'd feel comfortable, because I knew what my goals were.
I want to ask you something, too. I hope you don't mind. No. The Bettelheim stuff, that evil man who, by the way, apologized. He was a total fraud and committed suicide. Did you get it that he was so bad? Yes. Oh, okay. I worried. You assured me, but I worried.
When we filmed that scene in the studio, the booty scene is one of those things, we didn't intend to shoot it. But I just saw, I don't know, I just jabbed the camera woman and said, so that we just sort of caught by accident, the putting on the booties and the little side comment. That was in the outtakes. That was nothing that was never, intended to be in the film. But when she was in the studio and did the thing about the picture plane tilting up, I knew when we filmed that we were going to use it. That was just too good to ever, not use. It was brilliant. It's a brilliant little lecture on the history of art. And the stuff, some of my favorite, like the art, I love the life drawing class. And there's so much more in that life drawing class. We could have made a whole film out of the life drawing class.
Well, that's an interesting question, too, about the choices that you make in putting this film together. You see Audrey working in the studio a little bit, and you see some choices that she's making in terms of how she's working on compositions and things like that. And you mentioned things that ended up on the cutting room floor, yours truly being one of them. And outtakes that, and I'll never forgive you, and outtakes, that were so good, but that you just couldn't fit in. How it seems to me like it's very much like making a painting, to decide what's going in and what's coming out, and and what makes the narrative the right way and what's extraneous. But it must be difficult to make those decisions.
It's very, very difficult, and there are people here who can attest to the fact that there were moments when this film was quite terrible. There are people here who saw various edits. We struggled with it. It was boring for a long time. It was confusing. It was too long. We sort of liked it. We thought we had a good film, and we showed it to a few people, and they were like, no, I don't think so. And people tried to be kind to us, but it's hard. It is hard. It's just hard creative work. It is. I guess it's like any other creative process. You do have to stick with it. I mean, if anybody, I'm sure there are people here who are struggling with the same stuff and have struggled with the STEM stuff. You just have to stay with it. You can't let it go too soon, because it wouldn't be right.
When you morphed, when I was talking about the picture plane being tilted up, and you morph one of my paintings into a Pollock, I thought that was brilliant.
That's pure, right? That was Rachel came in
and
Rachel went off and did that and came and showed it to me one day. I was like, oh my God. It's great. It really is a great moment.
Well, it's what Audrey's talking about, that art is this thing that spans through history, and it's very nuanced and rich, and we're impacted by things that are not obvious to us, and I think that, anyway.
You found a way to illustrate it that, it's what Terrie said before.
But one thing I just want to say in terms of the question that you were asking is, first of all, we asked people to watch, this is how a film is made, and there are filmmakers here, I'm sure, is you start off with something and you screen it and you screen it and you screen it and you screen it with people who are going to be honest with you because you desperately need it, and you will do that same thing for them, and they will tell you, oh, this looks like 3 different movies, Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. And I'm thinking, okay, is that a problem? And maybe it is and maybe it isn't, but it was an unintegrated work. The other thing is, how do those 3 different worlds, those 3 different films, emotionally relate to each other? And hopefully what we have now is integrated those, if you will, 3 different worlds, which was in a way Audrey's childhood, photorealism, and then the 30 years after that, which is really the 3 sections, and build a unified sort of vision of an individual creative spirit, the art world and its impact on an individual, et cetera, et cetera. But also the film was 2 hours for a while, and it was way too long. And I think that is really challenging, bringing it down, because we were in love with lots and lots of stuff, I mean, I still want there to be more art in it, and I think there's probably the right amount.
Must have some more
up here.
questions, yeah.
Hi. 2 things. One, in looking at that, how much research was done before you actually started to put the film together? Because when you are doing fiction, a guy writes it and they do whatever they do and then they have it all mapped out. But when you're trying to create a portrait of someone's life with an arc about that, how long before you start shooting?
Almost none. I mean, ahead of time. I don't work that way. Some documentarians do. They even write a script ahead of time that they think the film will follow. You can't write a script for a documentary because you don't know what you're going to get. But I don't do that. Some people do. But what I call the sort of master interview, the one of Audrey in the green sweater, I filmed very shortly after that meeting in the coffee shop. It was the first interview, and Audrey pretty much told us, amazingly enough, kind of the arc of her entire story that day. And there were things we went back and revisited in other interviews and swapped stuff out. But it really was, I wasn't kidding. It was a process of discovery. I was learning, as I was going about Audrey.
I wondered, when you said 4 years, that was one of the things also, how long did it take you to finally, when you picked up the brush again on that painting, because you did the speed motion on it. So.
I didn't paint that fast.
How long was
that painting? Oh, probably close to a year. You know, things are so sped up these days. You have to, you know, knock it out fast. And ABAX was a pretty fast way of working.
A year is fast on that?
A year is a nice amount of time. Yeah. Artists used to work on things for 10 years. I mean, 11 years. And we have to start thinking like that, you know, slow art and slow time. It's important. It's at a gallery in storage right now. New one in the studio.
Here's a question here, and then
Yeah, the white canvas that you see at the very end of the film is now a painting.
Yeah, that took a couple
4 years
years
later.
Yeah.
Yeah, here.
So I just have to say that listening to all of you talking after having watched the film, it seems to me as if you're actually perfectly matched, because the cornerstone of all of this is integrity. And but what my question to you is, after all your 4 years of film, sitting in Cannes, and you've had this 4-year experience of being with Audrey and looking at her art and researching and looking through her photographs, how did you ultimately decide on what story you wanted to tell? Why don't you go first, Rach?
Well, that was kind of the process I described before. But Deborah's, you know, her model, which since she started the film, she got to sort of lay the groundwork for, was that we build the whole thing chronologically. And that was when we had the 3 different films. And so then, you know, you're not, what you have to do is find an emotional through line. And that we were still working on till pretty darn close to the end. You know, where does the Esther Williams scene go? And forever, the Esther Williams scene, because it takes place in her childhood, went in the first act. And very, very, am I giving away too much? No. Very, very late.
We have no secrets.
That scene, it emotionally belongs at the end with the sculpture. The story of her loving Esther Williams as a child. But we had to make it work at the end. With a little bit of tinkering, we did. And that's the kind of thing that took a long time to get to. When you say, so it is both the arc of her life, but it's really an emotional arc. You know, the story is really an emotional trajectory. I don't know if that's...
For me, there's a lot of distillation. It's sort of like distilling something. You film all, you do all these interviews, and we transcribe everything, and we start almost on paper. You know, you just start reading every interview and this bit, you know, choosing bits, and you just reduce it slowly. I think some people have a different process also for editing documentaries, but I sort of always likened it to sculpting like from a piece of marble, you know, just you chip away at it little by little by little by little till the film emerges. And somewhere in here, I have to say there's some magic. There's just some mystery that happens at some... I'm glad you agree, Rachel, because I'm not to diminish Rachel's skill as an editor.
I don't know.
But there's, you know, at some point, like suddenly you put these 2 pieces together, maybe even accidentally that you hadn't thought of putting together, all of a sudden that you see them back to back and you're like, wow. You know, you get something else happens. So after our struggles and after the 3rd or 4th time we thought we were kind of done and showed it to people and got a bad reaction, we went back and kind of tore it. We had the same bits, but we tore it apart and put it together in a different order, and then we knew we had it. Then we knew we were on the right path finally.
We'll take one more question, and then we'll let everybody go home here. Yeah.
I'm just in awe of your process, Audrey, and I wanted to find out how much, you mentioned the Depression, or the Depression was represented in the film, how you found the process of getting out of that, and if the Depression had a lot to do with this refrigerator mother aspect of parenting. It must have provoked a lot of anger, I imagine, and if that anger found its way into your work at all, or if you found yourself you know, if you were shutting down at all because of that I have some experience of parenting an unusual child, and
You do.
yes, and
I'm so glad you're saying that. I got a letter, an email from an author who's written 5 award books in Oxford, England, who parent. So if this film does anything, let's hope it does that. So go ahead.
well, just I think there's some vestiges of what the refrigerator mother, maybe I call it the oven mother approach from some educators, whatever. Just this idea that not understanding the organic, what you were saying, what you saw in your child's eyes in those photographs, and more wanting to put it on to your parenting. I was wondering how much of that might have shut you down at some point, or how much you were working through that in your work. If when you were doing something so different, working from photographs, that's such a strong thing to be doing at that time. Considering what was popular in art. I'm just very impressed that you worked through that, and I was just curious about where this parenting struggle fit into your decision to make such a unique approach to your art making.
That is an amazing question. It's huge, and I mean we'll meet and have lunch. But when I got into that depression, I would leave the studio and I'd go to Broadway, and there was a SRO, single rooming house, for schizophrenics and alcoholics and blah, blah, blah. And I would sit with them all day on benches. They called it the Broadway Mall. Broadway Mall. It's a couple of benches in the middle of Broadway with a garbage can filled with empty pizza boxes. But what I did then is I had little pieces of paper and I would take notes. This is, how many years later? At least 35. I'm finishing a book. And I hope that will give you the answer. It's complex. Our lives are complex, all of us. There's nobody here that has a simple life that's not been hit by some form of tragedy, illness, joy. We all get it. I started to write to try to understand what was happening to me. And it was many things. One interesting thing, outside of the motherhood, and all of that's part of it, is that, and we didn't talk about it then, you were condemned, not only by the medical establishment, but the art world didn't want to know that you were a mother. Too bad. We have to talk about 9th Street women. We have to have a panel on 9th Street women. So that book infuriated me.
Done.
But photorealists were having strokes. And photorealists were drinking a little too much. And there's something about the exactitude that it required that was also getting to me. So it was a myriad of things. It was. Life either forces you to look at it and walk through the fire and get out the other side, or you go down. I don't think you have much of a choice. I don't think you can stand there and say, ha! It either knocks you under, and if it knocks you under, you've got to somehow, excuse me. There is a poem at the bottom of that painting, Wheel of Fortune.
Okay, we'll make sure we get it up.
Thanks. Because
now that I've gotten my walking orders here.
The painting is hanging at Terrie's
that
museum.
poet who's been sort of frowned upon, because a 19th century kind of romantic poet, is now coming up people are now writing about them. But it's about I wish I could recite the poem, but it's about keeping your strength, Invictus. Keeping your strength, keeping your center, keeping going.
Well, I think that's a great way to end this. Keep your strength, keep your focus. Thank you so much.